At its time, this Peak Design travel tripod was quite revolutionary. It allowed photographers and videographers to have a lightweight solution that they could bring with them without having to lug all their gear around. Yet at a whopping $650 for this carbon fiber travel tripod, you could have just that. That is until the Ulanzi Coman 0Y travel tripod came out. Let me tell you why. Being marketed as another travel tripod for photographers and creators, the Ulanzi tripod has been hailed as a true competitor to the Peak Design and at roughly half the cost. Now, the Ulanzi seems to have looked towards Peak Design here for inspiration, but does that mean you should get it? Does that make the Peak Design aluminum version a better deal for you? Or is there another option out there that's better fitting for you? Let's find out. But first, it's important to note I bought both these products myself, so no money exchanged hands here. I just want to make a video comparing them so that way you guys can make a better informed decision. That means all thoughts on my own. For starters, let's see what's included with each tripod. The Peak Design tripod comes in the box with the tripod, a waterproof carrying case, a Peak Design Arca Swiss plate, a mobile mount, a hex wrench tool with holder, and a bushing removal tool. The Ulanzi tripod, on the other hand, comes in a box with the tripod, foot spikes, a storage bag, a hex wrench tool, and a manual. All of these are pretty helpful, and we'll dive into them a little bit more later. So if you're looking for a travel tripod, you're most likely considering the weight. After all, that's probably the main reason why you're looking at a travel tripod in the first place, right? Okay, so I'm holding them both in my hands. They're both very lightweight tripods, and that's thanks to their carbon fiber design. The Peak Design comes in at 2.8 pounds, whereas the Ulanzi comes in at 2.4 pounds. If you're looking to squeeze out every ounce of your kit, the Ulanzi will probably be your best bet here. Now honestly, to me they feel about the same. The Ulanzi is a little bit lighter, but I mean, if you're adding it to your pack, I don't really feel a difference when I add it to my backpack or something like that. Another important factor for a travel tripod is its portability, so let's take a look at its size. The Peak Design travel tripod is 15.4 inches when fully collapsed, and the Ulanzi travel tripod is 16.7 inches when fully collapsed, and they both have a diameter of 3.1 inches. In targeting these measurements, both have a very slim design and are roughly the same shape as a reusable water bottle, like this 46-ounce water bottle I use, or say this plastic water bottle. What's really cool is it allows you to store these tripods in existing backpack water bottle holders. And it's even better if your backpack has two water bottle holders, because then you can put your tripod in one and a bottle of water in the other, so that way you're always prepared whenever you go out on a hike or something like that. Now you also have the option to sling it underneath your backpack and carry the tripod that way, although it's not as safe unless you somehow find a way to buckle it through the legs to ensure the tripod is safe. You could also use the include bags if you like, but they're really not that practical. So here it really comes down to user preference, because if that extra inch really matters for you, then you'd want to go with the Peak Design one. But I actually kind of like the height of the Ulanzi one because it gives me that extra reach for my backpack. So I know it will be secure and it won't fall out from the latches because of how short it is. Now we're going to take a look at the legs of these tripods. Both feature the same latch lock design as opposed to the standard twist lock legs you might see. I actually prefer the latches as you're not over tightening them to ensure that they are as secure as possible because they can only go so far. Here the latches on the Peak Design are very sleek and robust, blending into the build, and they are made with high quality aluminum-like plastic that is durable. The Ulanzi on the other hand features these lips which makes it easy to grab and open to release the legs. But the plastic on these latches doesn't feel as nice and robust as the ones on the Peak Design. What I've done to both these latches here is tune them to be fairly rigid via the back locking mechanism. It's also important to note that over time, as you open and close the latches, they'll become more loose. What this means is you're going to have to maintain them using the included hex wrenches to keep them in the best shape possible. Peak Design also has a great video on how to maintain your tripods, which I'll link below. I will say though that the Ulanzi legs to be far sturdier than the ones on the Peak Design. It may be due to the circular shape of the tripod legs, whereas Peak Design's shape resembles a squished hexagon. For some reason, the Peak Design flexes quite a bit here, as you can see. I'll show you the effects that this has on the stability in a little bit. So we took a look at these tripods when they were completely collapsed. Now let's take a look at them when they're fully extended. The Ulanzi here, when you extend the column all the way up, reaches up to 61.7 inches tall, and the Peak Design here reaches up to 60 inches tall. Now, as reference, I'm 5'9". However, the only time I feel like you'd be extending it this high is when you're trying to get that extra reach, which is a very rare case. But still, it's good to know the limits of both these tripods. When we lower the center column with the legs fully extended, the Peak Design sits at 51.3 inches and the Ulanzi sits at 52.3 inches. So you can kind of see here, this is typically, I think, the ideal point you'd be shooting at anyway. You can have your camera on the tripod and be able to look through it without having to bend over much. I'll also compare the stability of these at this height because this is typically how high you would have it and you want to know how stable it is, so stay tuned for that. Now let's take a look at functionality and ease of use. We'll start off with the ball head. Here's where when I first saw the Ulanzi, I was completely blown away and considered selling my Peak Design. Okay, take a look at this. On the Peak Design, if you want to use the ball head, first you have to extend the center column, lock that into place, and then you have to loosen the locking mechanism on the ball head itself to actually rotate it around and get what you want. That's okay, it's something I've kind of gotten used to, but it's still a pain. These locking pins can easily be taken off, which is really nice as it allows me to fit my camera on with a cage on it. Now I like doing this because I don't have to worry about the included plate here. I don't have to worry about this possibly becoming loose just to the nature of me twisting the camera around, and the cage just keeps it really nice so it won't move around on you while you're twisting the ball head. So it just kind of goes in like that. I can lock this, and then I can just move this any which way, and boom, it will just stay there. And then that means I can also use the Arca Swiss on anything else, so it just makes it much more versatile than being stuck to just their included Arca Swiss plate. Something else I also really like about this tripod is, I'll show you this. So there's this locking mechanism here, which means you can't take this part down, so you can't get the camera off. The only way to do it is, what I think is pretty easy, is just to rotate this around, and then that allows you to then take it off. So I fully trust this mechanism and how it works with my camera completely. However, let's say you want to take a portrait shot. See these little feet here? It only allots you a very narrow window to move. Like, this is all you're really getting. And it's something that's just not ideal, especially for portraits, because you can't bring it this way at all. The only way to do that is to kind of take it off the camera, move it around, so that way you can use this on this side, so it'd essentially be flipped. And it's not the most conducive because, I mean, you're only getting an angle that high, which isn't that great. So some problems you may have with this ball head is that when you go to tighten this, your framing may move on you. Now, I've only had this happen very few times. It's usually pretty easy to nail down, like as you see there, pretty simple. But say you're trying to be very precise and you go to tighten it and it moves just a little bit, that's kind of somewhat of a deal breaker if that's something that you think. But you know, with larger lenses as well, you tighten it down and there's virtually no sag. Like, let's see if I do it like this. There's some drift down if you just don't tighten it all the way, but if you really crank it, it's going to stay where you put it. With all that said, the Peak Design tripod's ball head supports up to 20 pounds, which includes the center weight for anchoring things to the bottom to keep it a little bit more stable. Now, when we take a look at the Ulanzi, they kind of improve on all the measures here that Peak Design has done. So for example, here this sits into the tripods here. On the Ulanzi, it is a bowl that's kind of right here. So you just unleash this little clamp here and allows you to give some range of access to actually make movements without first raising it, which I think is a pretty nice thing and I really like. So in terms of ease of use, it's faster to use, and when the center column is down, you spend less time fidgeting with it because you can easily get to the position that you want without having to worry about first raising the center column. So this is a really nice touch that I really do appreciate. Attaching my camera to this one. So as we can see here, I can place it in and then you squeeze it in like that. It's not that hard to do, but as you can see here, it sits in the bowl and you can easily rotate it around. It's a little bit limited, but I mean, it's in the bowl form. If you were to raise it just like the Peak Design, you're able to get it up and move it a little bit more. Let's see if we lock that down, do that. And then another feature it has is this panorama dial. So first you unleash this mechanism here, and then it just rotates on the axis, which is cool for panoramic photographers, I would imagine, because it allows you to capture all the stills on a solid axis without having to manually do it and then crop and post with all the frames. I'm sure this will help people who create panoramics quite a bit and give you a nice fluid motion without much jerking if you use it for something like, let's say, video and as well, just because it will allow you to not crop in on frames if they're not level, or they're, you know, with this one you'd be jerking around, so as you go to move it wouldn't exactly be in line, whereas here, you know, everything's going to be in line, so it'll just allow you to get the max resolution for your panoramics and whatnot. So where the Ulanzi also shines in is its ability to take portrait shots. So as we saw with the Peak Design here, you're really limited to just turning it to the left and then working from there, and that's kind of it. Whereas with this one here, you simply just undo the latch and you've got full range of motion. As you can see by the cutout, there's one on this side and one on the other side. So you can go like this or like this. And then from there, you've also got the panoramic dial. So that allows you to just completely go any way you want. So you have full range of motion, which is something that I think is like a no-brainer. It just makes so much sense compared to this, which seems so limiting. And that's why when I first saw this tripod, I was completely blown away, and I just really liked it, and I wanted to try it out. An interesting part here, though, is if we undo this here, let me tighten this back down, is if we undo this, it also comes with its own plate. It's got this kind of swivel thing, which I'm not really a huge fan of because it's not as secure as, say, something like this is with its, as you can see here, moving around, with its lock to make sure that this part just cannot come down at all. So this, I mean, it can come loose, which I'm not that big of a fan of. And so it's also got its own locating pins, but instead of being here on the actual ball head, they're on the plate. And, you know, I said I won't really use a plate. So to me, this isn't really helpful. And it looks like you can actually remove them, yeah, with a hex wrench. So the thing with this dial locking system is there's no back plate like there is with the Peak design here to ensure that it won't come off. So you have to really tighten this down. Otherwise, if you go up and move it into portrait mode or something like that, it could start to slide. So you really want to crank that to make sure that it won't, your camera won't move. I mean, unless you're using the included locking plate, which has those locking pins on the bottom of them. With all that said, the ball head for the Ulanzi can hold up to 6.6 pounds, so that's just the ball head here. With the center column included, it can hold up to 40 pounds, which is quite blown away compared to the Peak design here, which was only 20 pounds. So, I mean, you can kind of see here, and I'll talk about that later in terms of stability as well, just because you're going to be able to add stuff, which will then make the tripods more stable, obviously. So let's move on to the center column for both these tripods. Now, as you can see, both of them have a little hook at the bottom, and they both have a hidden compartment within them that house different items. So the Peak design center column houses the phone mount for the Arca Swiss. So it actually fits into this area here. So you'd put your phone into these grooves, and then there's this little locking mechanism here where when you put it into the plate, it will latch into that, so it won't go, the phone mount won't go down. And what you can do is, you know, lock this back into place, and it can hold your phone, and you can do whatever you would want with that. And the cool thing with it too is that it also goes into portrait mode. Now, this is something that I honestly wouldn't use ever. I mean, you know, I just have no need for it. But I mean, if it's something that you're interested in, or it helps you make the decision, then, you know, it's there for you and you can use it. You can take it out if you want, or, you know, you can just keep it in there. Now, the Ulanzi center column houses its hex tool for in these making the adjustments to everything on here. You know, it's kind of like a little screwdriver sort of thing. It's not the best quality, just because when looking at it, it seems neat, but as you can see here, it's hard to get some torque on it because there's this part here, which I guess you can use to spin it. But if you're really trying to crank something in, let's take a look at this. It's just hard to grab it just because of how it is in nature. And then there's nothing, I mean, my thumb's digging into it there. So it's hard to, it just doesn't protrude as much to get enough leverage to really tighten things down. But the good thing about it is that it fits right into here and then screws in, so it's very hard to lose. So Peak Design's is actually right here that comes on this little clamp, which you can attach to any leg you'd like, which is pretty neat because it keeps it out of the way, pretty low profile, and when you close it, it doesn't interfere with anything. And you can take it out, and it comes with these two different hexes here. And then from there, you can choose which one you want to use, pull it out, and then put it into the tripod. And then what this does is it actually gives you enough leverage to be able to make the additional torque that you need in order to tighten something down and know that it's actually as tight as you would want it, as opposed to just with this one just kind of hoping it's good, or, you know, not even using that to begin with. But the cool thing with this too is you don't have to worry about this falling out necessarily, because it just goes into here and then it clicks into place. The additional thing that I like about this too is, and what I've done is, it's got this little ring here, and I actually put it on with my keys. So if, you know, I'll always have it on me, and if I ever want to put my keys in, I can simply just put this into the little latch here, and my keys can hang from it. So, you know, I always have that kind of stuff with me. So we kind of talked a little bit on how to extend these center columns. And I wanted to take a look at it because the Peak design, it's a little bit finicky. I don't like it as much as you can see here, just because there's this little knob that you have to pull out and then you have to dial towards to loosen it. And then that will allow you to move it. And then you have to dial it back. And as you can see, that's a lot of moving it. Close this back in too, which is really nice to keep it nice and low profile, but it just makes it harder to move the center column. Moving over to the Ulanzi here, it's got this simple latch which allows you to just take it out, move it, and then just lock it back down. It's similar to the legs, which is a style I really like and appreciate. My only gripe with the Ulanzi one, and this is kind of a deal breaker in a sense, is how loose the center column is when it's in here. As you can see, it shakes around quite a fair bit. I'm not sure why that is, if it's like the locking mechanism or what, but on the Peak design, it's like sturdy in there. As you can see, I'm just holding down the legs and then moving the center column. It's not really doing much here. Holding it down, doing the same thing. And this one wiggles, and I just don't like that. I'll talk about that more when I get to the stability portion. And if you want, you can jump ahead to that. I'll leave timestamps. So something else you can do with these tripods as well is, you can see they're here in their fully extended mode with their legs and everything. What you can actually do as well is they've both got low profile modes. As you can see here by this column, it's kind of perforated a bit. It allows you to loosen both these heads here, move them to the side, and there's a little hex in there that you can unscrew, and in doing so, it allows you to go into low profile mode on these cameras. And what that does is pretty much gets you closer to the ground, so that way you can just pop this lad here. Hold on a second. Take out this main center column. Just pop this guy in, however you would want. Unscrew this so we can get him there. And what that allows you to do essentially is to close up these legs if you would like. Lock them down, and then use this little tab here to extend it, and it will allow you to get the tripod into a much low profile position. And this works for all the legs too. So it gives you a much wider base, which will make it obviously more stable as well, but it allows you to get it lower to the ground, so that way you can get it. You can also raise this up as well, tying it down and really maneuver it however you would want to get positions lower if that's something that you're into. Something I haven't really used at all ever, actually, now that I mention it. But, something that you can definitely use if you'd like. The Ulanzi features the same exact thing as well. So simply just undo this latch, move it, same thing. We'll use this one so I can kind of show you guys what I was talking about with this X tool. And essentially the same exact thing. So undo that, pop that bad boy out, put this lad in here like so, and move this guy out of here, do that. And the thing with this one, so on the Peak design, what we saw was there's only that one latch that can go to. Ulanzi features one latch here, or you can move it one further, which is more in line with the Peak design. So you have two different forms, and with the center column gone, it makes sense to kind of do that, I guess, because if it's in this mode, you can only go up so high, whereas if you have another mode which you can go to, it gives you a little bit more height if you need it. So that's something that's pretty cool. Now we'll move on to the feet, and I'll just show you how easy it is to kind of collapse these and open them. So you can easily just unlatch all of these. Bum, 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 bum. Latch, da, da, da. What you can do is move them all like that. Do that, and then just wrap your hand around them. Now, obviously, I've tightened them a bit, so they're much harder to, the latches are much harder to push down, just because I wanted to make sure they're more secure, and that means that the legs just won't move down as much, or they won't be loose. So let's say you've got it locked, like on these ones here. Let's say you've got it locked. If they're not tuned to be super tight, you might have some slipping, like let's say like over time, we'll just kind of slowly, well, you can't see that, it would just kind of like slowly go down if it's not completely locked. But I don't know, just for my peace of mind, I like to tighten them so they're pretty tight. I'll do the same here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the Peak design. So I just showed you Ulanzi. Dun 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 dun. So same sort of thing, move them down like that. Move it all up. And then to extend them, it'd be the same exact way. So it'd just be the opposite of what I'm doing here, which is kind of unlatch all of them, do the same thing, and then wrap your hands around. Now these ones are much tougher just because of how I've tuned them, but essentially, there you go, same thing. So when looking at the feet of these tripods, I actually prefer Peak designs here because it's got these hex screws in them, which makes it much harder for them to come out. And it's also made of this very hard, like plastic that's very dense, which feels way better when moving the tripod around. It just moves and it doesn't bounce around or anything like that. Whereas with the Ulanzi ones here, when I take a look at them, they're very spongy sort of plastic, and if I go and move it around, it kind of bounces as I do it. The one thing I don't like about these additionally is that they're screwed on, so they have the potential to come loose and they might get lost. But as you can see here, the screw lengths are actually kind of long, so in order for that to happen, it can have to come out quite a bit first in order for you to lose the leg. One of the cool things about Ulanzi though is that it includes the spike feet, which you can just easily screw in without any tool whatsoever, and just having the spike feet included is something that will just help you with stability, and as opposed to the Peak design where you have to pay an additional amount for it. It's just much better, especially from a more budget tripod, as opposed to the Peak design at roughly half the cost. Now that we have all this info, how stable are these tripods? Well, taking in everything that I previously mentioned, and then the fact that they're carbon fiber in nature makes them weaker, just because they're lighter and they are a little bit more flexible. They don't have that extra weight to kind of hold them down and keep them steady. So keep that in mind when we go through this section. So one of my concerns about the feet with the Ulanzi tripod here is, as I mentioned earlier, how spongy the feet are, is that when you go to move it around, it kind of bounces on the floor as I move it. The Peak design doesn't suffer from this at all, but I would imagine when you add the spike feet on both of them, it's just negligible. You wouldn't see any difference because they're spiked, so it's stuck in the ground, and you'd use that wherever it's accurate for. So that is a difference with the Ulanzi when just using the regular feet. In terms of stability, this one will be a little less stable just in that sense. Now in terms of legs, the stability on the Ulanzi is actually fairly nice. When I lock these down and try to flex it, I think it's just due to their round nature. Here, let me do this. You can see there's slight flexing. Let's see here. Yeah, there's slight flexing, but overall it's pretty solid. When I take a look at the Peak design one here, when we undo these latches, extend it all the way, and I do the same exact thing I just did on the Ulanzi, this flexes a lot more than the Ulanzi one. And that's something you see when you have it completely extend all the legs as well. Like if you apply any pressure, you can see there's quite a bit of bowing, whereas for the Ulanzi one, the bowing is non-existent really when comparing the two side by side. Now when the center column is raised on the Ulanzi, it wobbles an unbelievable amount. I showed you earlier. The thing with this is you won't be able to rely on it for a long exposure, time lapse, or any sort of fixed tripod for video work. The center column just isn't secure enough, and I'm not sure why that is, to really handle much of any weight, where it'll just add to the wobble and just makes all the footage completely unusable, I think. Whereas the Peak design, from what I've noticed, is it's just rock steady in that sense. I've used it on multiple shoots before, and I'll throw up a shoot that I just recently went on that I used this as a locked off tripod angle, and it worked flawlessly. There was no movement whatsoever, and I would fully trust it in terms of stability for this, for things like video work. Now I don't have a telephoto lens, but I will rig up my camera here with all the stuff that's on that camera and kind of show you what it looks like in terms of stability. You know, I'll kind of shake it around and you can get a sense of what the center column is like, how much it wobbles, how sturdy it is, and I'll actually record it as well so you can see the footage that it's creating and whatnot. I mean, that's more in terms of video, I guess, but you know, if you were to use it for photo as well, you can kind of get a sense of if you're using it for, say, long exposure or something like that, or you just want to have a good tripod that you can lock off and take pictures from. You can kind of get a sense of what it will look like with the weight and if there's any wind or something like that, and how that will affect these tripods. So right now I've got the Peak Design hooked up to my makeshift telephoto lens. I've kind of just rigged it up. I got a 70 on here. That's what it's at right now, 70 millimeter, with, you know, top handle, a lot of front heavy weight on the front of this to kind of show you what the stability is like. So, I mean, if I just move it like this a little bit, I'm recording here as well, so you can see what this will look like. But if I just shake it a little bit, you can kind of see what's happening there. I mean, there's a fairly a little bit of shake, but it seems pretty stable like that. And we've got the center column here too with the hook that I've got a bag that I'll hook up to as well and kind of show you that. But yeah, for this, you can really kind of lock it off, bring it any which way you would want, tighten it down. See, it kind of sags a little bit there, shifts down a little bit, but you know, that's, I guess, to be expected, things like this. Anyway, let's see, what else am I trying to show you here? So that's the stability for that. I mean, you see if I do this, the center column is not really moving at all. You can see some minor shakes on the actual footage itself, but with that, it's very, very minimal, I think, at least. I'll compare it to the Ulanzi as well. Right now, what I'll do is add a bag to it, and we can see if that changes anything really to it here. So let's do that now. Most things too is the bag you're gonna have most likely will not fit to the bottom of this, of these center hooks. So what I've done is I've got a carabiner hook here that I can just kind of loop on through. The carabiner is actually a bit too big to fall into the hook, so I have to hook it through the hook for some reason. But now there's that. We got some extra weight. It's actually, let's see, try jostling a little bit more. So that's kind of, you can see the legs are starting to definitely wobble a lot here. The footage though is a little bit shaky, but I mean, I don't know how often you'd be out in windy environments and whatnot, but let's see here. Here, I'll just shake the center column and you can kind of see there's a little bit of movement. It's fairly good for what I think of a travel tripod. It's not like your big Manfrotto style tripods that are set and they will not move at all. These are kind of things that, you know, you bring with you to travel. I think it's fairly decent. Now, what I'll do is I'll do the same thing here, but on the Ulanzi one, and we'll kind of go from there and compare the two. So now we're gonna put this on the Ulanzi tripod and see how it fares the same way, or compared to the Peak Design. Let me just lash this down. Okay. It seems like it's not gonna move at all, really. Okay, now let's get this framed up about the same as we had the... Oh wow, that's... Yeah, so as you can see right now, the center column definitely does have a lot of play here, because I locked it off, and then as soon as I took off all the weight of me locking it, it just fell because the center column. So, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that you're paying for, I guess. If you go with Ulanzi, you're not getting that quality. Okay, so now that's all hooked up. Let's, you know, shake it a bit and see how it looks. I think I'm shaking it roughly about the same. The legs, although being sturdier, I don't know what it is with this, but it's just, you can see there's a whole lot of play. I think the culprit might be the center column. Is it just, I mean, because you can see the footage, that's just, I would not trust this at all. Like if someone just randomly bumps into it, I mean, obviously if someone randomly bumps into any tripod, there's gonna be some sort of movement, but there's quite a bit more play with this. Here, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't like how they executed this as much as how Peak Design really kind of did it with their own. So with this one, I can just latch the backpack up and over. Let's see if this makes any difference. Because you're adding more weight to it, so it should theoretically make it more stable, but yeah, it makes it fairly more stable. You still do see some of those micro jitters, so something in the wind. I mean, keep in mind, I've got this with a lot of weight on the front to kind of mimic a telephoto. So for people who would be using it like that, it's going to be fairly heavy there. So that's what it looks like. Now let me move it around and we can see more kind of. Oh, wow, that is not good either. There's so much weight from the backpack that it's actually collapsing the center column here. Here, let me bring this down and actually see if I can make that even tighter than what I had it at. I'm just gonna really buckle that down there. Okay. Now if we put this in, will it bring it down? Seems fairly steady. Let's play around with this though and see what happens. So lock it off over there. Let's see. I mean, it's still a lot of play with the center column. So if you lock it off, I mean, it's gonna do the same thing. One of the interesting things though is it's got this panoramic head. So if you do have it locked off, you can just kind of bring it and it smoothly goes, which is nice, I suppose, but for what you're really paying and getting for, it's hard to justify this Ulanzi tripod just because of the how it's performing right now comparatively to the Peak Design. Peak Design is definitely a big win in my book. Here, let's move it over here and see if we got anything. Yeah, still a lot of play, moving around. Yeah, it's something I'm not too happy with, and you know, it's just, that's why I'm doing this, so that way you guys can see it and develop your own opinions on what you think and what you would go for. I mean, obviously prices are very different here. The Peak Design aluminum is actually around the same price as the Ulanzi, so that may be a viable option for you if you're looking for something. It will obviously be heavier, but that means it'll also be more stable as well. Let's talk about build quality with these tripods, because you're most likely going to be traveling with them as well, and you want to make sure that they're going to endure the environments that you bring them into. They're both of carbon fiber construction, which makes them stiffer, lighter, weather resistant, and stronger than their aluminum counterparts. My Peak Design here shows signs of wear, and it still performs exactly it does as the first day that I got it, which is pretty great. The build quality is fairly nice, and it's a nice addition to your kit. The Ulanzi quality is a bit more lackluster and definitely feels cheap in areas like the feet, you know, the legs, the leg latches here. It's just not as strong plastic as the Peak Design one is. Peak Design seems much sturdier, whereas this feels like a cheap sort of plastic. And you know, the center column just wobbles, and the ball head also kind of has the same characteristic as the latches here on the feet, or on the legs rather. It just doesn't seem like it's that well built. It's just something that seems very unimpressive to me. And it's a shame because I was really looking forward to it. And from other reviews that I've seen, it seemed like it was going to be a really good option. But the Peak Design for me, in terms of build quality, just outperforms this in so many ways that I think the Peak Design is a better choice here. So let's wrap this up. I know when the Peak Design first came out, it would be beneficial to me. It allowed me to take it anywhere, but for that price, especially for the carbon fiber version, it was a very tough pill to swallow. That's when I saw the Ulanzi come on the market, I was intrigued. I mean, heck, they have some of the same features as the Peak design, and Ulanzi seems to have built on that in terms of ease of use. They've taken the pinch points from Peak design and improved on them in a sense. That leads me to say this: ultimately, you get what you pay for, and that's clearly the case here. I was very much looking forward to the Ulanzi tripod, but as I was reviewing it and comparing it to my Peak design, I just was reminded as to why I stuck with my Peak design in the first place. And that is because I was able to rely on it and use it and know that it would get what I would want and what I need without any problem whatsoever. I suppose if you're a beginner looking at getting your first travel tripod, the Ulanzi might be a good choice for you. Now, it is still a bit expensive, around $300, and there are other budget options out there like the Siru Travel Series, and that might be more beneficial to you. I mean, I like the Peak design and the Ulanzi just because they've got the latch leg mechanism. That's something that I really like, so I was comparing both these in a sense for that. And ultimately, I just want to say you really get what you pay for here. One of my mentalities is buy something nice so that way you're not buying it over and over again. So if you buy something cheap, most often it's going to break and then you have to go and buy that again or upgrade to something better that won't break. And that's just something that I've subscribed to in a sense, is just trying to get the best gear possible so that way I can just buy it and then never have to worry about it again. And I have to say, with Peak design, I'm pretty sure that's a solid case scenario where it actually is an example of what I'm describing, because I'm able to trust it out in the field. I'm curious though, what would you guys choose and why? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any other suggestions for videos for me to do, let me know down in the comments below as well, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.